Hi, welcome to Second Earth Alternative. This is Felipe Osorio. So we have a great episode today. We're going to be analyzing the CNN clip regarding the Area 51 raid, or as some people are just calling it, a rave party. But, you know, for the few hundred individuals who did show up, I want to say awesome. Like, really, you guys are 1 in 1,000. And I mean that literally. So how appropriate that after the Navy admits, I mean a day or two after the Navy admits the UFOs, or at least the Tic Tac UFO footage that was displayed by To the Stars Academy, that footage is indeed a real UFO or unidentified aerial phenomenon. Interesting that this channel was started by essentially from this energy of being upset that CNN was representing the primaries in such a biased perspective, all the while claiming that they were a non-biased, non-partisan organization. And I thought that was very not fair. So that's why we created the channel. Without further ado, let's go ahead and show this clip, and let me break it down to you how ridiculous this is.
To clarify this morning, there are no reports, according to CNN, of any alien sightings
near
Area 51.
Thank you for making it clear.
Despite...
Very funny. It's so funny. Oh, yes, my life is okay now. My kids are safe. I can go back to bed.
Despite...
Look at his face. He thinks it's the funniest thing in the world, just to consider aliens.
They wanted to see what was going to happen. We're talking about 2,000 people who flooded into Nevada after a call on Facebook.
So I guess they're estimating 2,000 people.
About 200 of them have made it to the main gate, but that obviously a much smaller number than the nearly 2 million who had pledged to raid the
Look at that.
facility.
Of course, they probably showed the one guy who has a tinfoil hat, and let me guess, they're probably going to show some guy raping an alien.
Well, we got around like
You just can't trust folks that stay on their word. They can't come through. 2 million said they'd be there. 200 made it to the gate. All right, so the local sheriff says 2 people were arrested for minor issues, including 1 alcohol-related arrest and another for indecent exposure. The sheriff said there was also a rollover accident with injuries.
But these are the pictures that we're getting from the area.
You know, it's kind of funny because if you do look back at some of the footage, you know, Contact, it got this one right. If you haven't seen it, check it out.
I don't know how else to explain it to you, but I think if you witness it, you will believe. There's stuff out there that's incredible that you wouldn't believe it unless you saw it for yourself. Physical legend. Come with Pete.
They can't stop us at all. It's like Halloween, but we're just annoying people.
So going back to the clip, I'm just going to go ahead and play on.
The latest pictures. So this is what's interesting when you talk about the timing of this. Because look at this picture. The U.S. Navy has confirmed videos purported to show that UFOs are indeed real. Now, a Navy spokesman doesn't refer to them as such. They call them unidentified aerial phenomena, not unidentified flying objects, for whatever reasons.
All right, with us now to discuss, Leroy Chow, retired NASA astronaut.
All right, so tell us what this means. Tell us what it means that the Navy has now told us that these things are real. I mean, look at her smile. Look how happy she is to do this particular news story. I don't mean to pick on her, but it's like this type of my life is safe. I need to take care of my little world type perspective that sometimes kind of bothers me. You know, I just don't. How do you say? I don't see it as a courageous perspective. Anyhow, okay, let's just play this clip.
Roy, you know, you're the person we turn to for all of this. Good morning to you.
And this guy, okay, if I were to identify her as not courageous, this guy is like the Joker. Look at his smile. Like, oh yes, we're gonna get these little people. We're gonna brainwash them with our CNN magic. No, just joking. I'm getting a little crazy here.
All right, so let's start here with the Area 51.
All right, tell us, astronaut.
200 people.
What is this?
At the gates. First, I want to know what the police reports are for the indecent exposure and the alcohol-related issue, but I'll find out.
That might not be morning material.
No, I don't think it is. But what do you make of this all this hysteria? There have been questions about Area 51, obviously, for quite some time. But it seems that this group just didn't, what started as a joke, didn't really come through on that promise or expectation.
Right, this shows you, of course, some of the perils of social media, right? So my understanding is even the organizer of that page actually was begging people, please don't actually go do this, you know? And even my 12-year-old daughter asked me about it, and she said their thing is they can't stop all of us. I said, well, you're talking about the U.S. military. Actually, they can. And they So glad it turned out more or less.
So I guess it kind of muffled out, but he was saying something to the fact of, yeah, if it was like tens or hundreds of thousands of people, you know, they thought that they could not be stopped. Well, he's saying this type of military, top secret military, yeah, they can stop you, which is the most truthful thing being said by a guy with the NASA shirt, which is basically like an emblem of we try, but we don't really tell you everything.
Peacefully, and you know, Area 51, of course, the best known secret military base, I think, in the world, probably purported to have all kinds of things there. But I believe, without any knowledge myself, but I would, of course, it's just a secret base that does all kinds of classified programs there.
All right, we want to tap into your knowledge, though. When it comes to these videos,
let's tap into his knowledge. He's a
they're not
NASA astronaut. He knows everything, guys.
They are acknowledging that they can't identify them. What's your guess? You've been to space?
Right. No, he knows how to identify them.
Right. Well, and so, I believe these pilots actually saw and
the Navy, as the entire military organization, does not know how to identify these, but this guy does.
Things that were flying that they couldn't explain, and even the Navy probably doesn't really know what they are, but I would bet, my guess is they're classified aircraft programs.
But
and
you
look
know
at the history of
it just happens to be a classified
there have been weird
aircraft.
Since,
that's what it has to be. Look, we did an episode about how there was a Navy patent. There was even a patent for TR-3B. There was a patent, or they talked about the reason why they had to have a patent for this Navy UFO, as they were trying to convince the patent officer that this is a legitimate patent. They basically stated that China was thought to have these type of patents. So let me be clear. The idea that an object spotted in modern times could be some kind of top secret program from another country, let's say, yeah, that's real. But how do you account for things like this? And look, going even beyond that, okay? I'm gonna disprove this idea of military in the end of this episode. And it has to do with a file that we discovered from the CIA website. And let's just say that in 1952, there is no way we had this technology. But I'll prove to you at the end of this episode why this is not just some foreign intelligence technology, but perhaps an extraterrestrial technology. So stay tuned for that, okay? I'm gonna give you the actual file. This is big.
later on, we might discover when something is unclassified, indeed it was an unclassified or it was a classified Air Force military program. And a good example, I was flying one day when I was back at NASA years ago, and I was flying with a senior astronaut, and he said, "Oh, look at that. We looked at something that looked a little bit odd flying around." And he said, back in the 1960s, I saw a contrail way above me that was pulsing, and that thing was flying so fast it had to be going at a really high Mach number. And later on, years later, it turned out that we were doing research work on high altitude pulse jets flying at very fast speeds. And so,
wow,
that's a good example.
Congrats. I'm so happy that his example, his knowledge of why he knows what the Navy doesn't know, is that one day in his lifetime he saw a contrail. Yet, what they're not even talking about is the fact that the actual descriptions of these objects don't include contrails. They include them jetting out like a bullet and disappearing out of nowhere. They include punching holes through the clouds and creating perfectly circular indentations afterwards. So the evidence that he's providing, that what he says he saw, which somehow makes his statement more valuable than the Navy itself not knowing what this is, well, he has to at least talk about what the people actually talk about when they're talking about UFOs, because they don't talk about contrails, okay? They talk about punching holes through clouds.
Looking at something or seeing something that you can't explain in a moment, but then later on turned out something that we were doing research on.
Leroy Chow, I always appreciate you.
Yeah, just like that Renaissance painting.
All this stuff with us that we don't understand.
Oh, she's so satisfied. Oh, her kids will be safe now. Okay, so as I was saying, I wouldn't take this astronaut's statement serious. And this is typical CNN. They're like, oh, we'll put an astronaut out there. He's some kind of expert. But this expert has a perspective that gives an example that doesn't even actually go with the actual descriptions of UFOs. Meaning he was watching a contrail, and that's his example of why people can see things that they don't actually think they could have seen from a terrestrial perspective. It's a ridiculous argument from somebody who happens to be an astronaut. Unfortunately for CNN, there are more famous astronauts who have said things like this.
I've read about this incident you had in 1951, and you said you saw literally hundreds of unidentifiable flying objects.
Yes, they were flying quite high. How high we couldn't tell because we couldn't get anywhere near their altitude. As they were sitting there filming, a little saucer came from, I say little saucer, it was a saucer, came flying over their heads, put down 3 little landing gear and landed right out on the dry lake bed. And they picked up their cameras and started over toward it, filming as they went. And when they got in fairly close to it, it lifted up, put the gear back in the wheel wells, tipped up, and took off at a great rate of speed.
Going further with this, the one thing that I was talking about earlier that I wanted to showcase to you, this was a file that we discovered from the CIA website itself. Just to indicate to you how sensitive this file is, I was trying to have a discussion with a commenter in my YouTube page, and I had started a thread with him in talking about this CIA file, which he got interested in, and upon providing him the actual link to the file, the whole thread, without any notification by me, like YouTube said nothing, that thing just got deleted. Just whips, like within 6 hours. So I'm going to show you a file that, if you guys didn't know, in 1952, there were these UFOs that were reported going over the White House. Okay, this is a real event. And in 1953, a panel was set up called the Robertson's Panel, which was a scientific panel that was set up to analyze the wave of sightings in July 1952 to see what it is that happened over Washington, D.C. and the Capitol. Now, what was so amazing about, what this file particularly that I'm about to show you references, and look guys, I had to transcribe 57 pages, which took a long time, and I don't know, it was something that I found in the CIA website itself. I don't know how I just kind of got there, but upon transcribing the page, on page 11, I found something that I thought was absolutely smoking gun that was in relation to this 1952 sighting. If you guys heard, in 1968, the Air Force came out with the Condom Report, which was their analysis that essentially said that they didn't believe that the UFOs were of scientific merit to be studied. And in a sense, the Condom Report has been used by skeptics as a form of a Bible to say, look, we have already studied UFOs scientifically, and they're saying that this is not real. Well, this document that is happening within these 57 pages, the Air Force in 1964 was trying to gather information so that they can conclusively create a proper report. And they're asking for information from the CIA regarding the Robertson's panel in 1953, which was set up to study the 1952 sightings over the White House. So what happened was the CIA kept blocking the information. They'd say, no, they either redacted the information where it was almost invaluable, or they would completely omit the information. And the Air Force was kind of getting frustrated. And you could see this correspondence happening between the Air Force and the director of the CIA. On page 11, finally, the CIA, in almost a moment of frustration, admits, and I'll put the document right over here, so you're telling me that the scientific panel set up in 1953 that was supposed to study the UFOs that went over our Capitol in 1952, or the White House, you're telling me that that panel was sponsored by the Central Intelligence Agency and the Air Force didn't know about this? But here's the thing. The Central Intelligence Agency doesn't have a military weapons department like the Air Force does. They cannot build weapons like the Navy or the Air Force can. So why and how would you justify the CIA sponsoring that panel if they can't make the weapons themselves, if they are not capable of creating the very thing that this CNN astronaut is telling us has to be some kind of foreign intelligence? Do you get my drift? There's no logical sense. Whatever the CIA was trying to hide, it was because they had some kind of intelligence regarding something that the Air Force could not build. Otherwise, they would have no problem sharing the information with the one organization that can actually counteract the aerial threat that was happening over our White House in 1952. So, sorry CNN, unfortunately this astronaut is just not cutting it for this channel. Thank you so much for joining me. This is Felipe Osorio, signing out.